Thank you, everyone, for joining our last installment of our Third Coast AI for Health Bowl education series. Really excited today as we cap off the past 6 months, going on 7 months of development for our teams to be able to introduce the 3 incubator labs that we have on here. And just, we thought that as you guys are developing out your solution, what's the next step? And the next step might be that you want to launch a company with the solution that you have. So we thought we'd get these folks who are experts in their field on here to talk about their different models for incubators so that you know what the choices are. And there are actually others, more diverse ones out there as well, but this is just a sampling. And so I will turn it over to Stephen to make the first introduction to himself and Matter, and then, followed by Nick and followed by Yuan.
Well, thanks. Happy to be here. Happy to be part of this group, and happy to share a little bit about what Matter does, and hopefully respond to any questions. So we're a healthcare technology incubator, innovation hub. Started in 2015 with a mission to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare. We believe fundamentally that collaboration is the best way to do that, that the more we can help entrepreneurs work with the established parts of the industry, the better able we're going to be to accelerate change in healthcare and help them advance their solutions. So functionally, there's 2 core things that we do. We incubate startup companies. We're a membership model. We've worked with more than 800 since we started. They're all over the world, and we have a suite of services that that help them at every stage of development. So our curriculum has around 100 classes in it. We have different mentoring programs. We help them raise money. We help them get traction in the market. They are about 2/3 of the companies are software, 20% or so are device, and then there's a mix of other types of technology that we work with as well. And then the second thing that we do is work with big companies, so health systems and life sciences companies and payers, and we help them innovate more effectively. And by working with them, by becoming a part and an extension of their innovation teams and their innovation strategy, we're also able to weave them together with entrepreneurs to create the kind of productive collaborations that we think are really critical to helping propel new technologies into the market that can ultimately solve problems that are meaningful for patients and clinicians and other healthcare stakeholders. And last thing, we're organized as a nonprofit entity. We sort of backed into our model based on our kind of mission and thesis around collaboration. So we wanted to create a neutral platform for collaboration, and so are structured as a not-for-profit.
Awesome. And can everybody hear me all right? Good, great, awesome. My name's Nick. I'm the Senior Director of Accelerator Programs and Healthcare at Nex Cubed. Similar to Matter, we kind of have internal programs and external programs, and I'll try to categorize that for what that means for us. Internally, we make investments and we put companies through a 4-month program where we pair them with a dedicated advisor or 2 to work on specific areas within their business that they're looking to accomplish over the next 4 months. So that could be go-to-market strategy, business development, FDA, that kind of thing. Also fundraising preparation, because we're an investor as well, is really important. On the external side of things, again, we work with big companies to help them innovate better. Try to help them get out of their own way, as we like to say, and work with the smaller companies in an effective manner. And so we've done programs with folks like GE Healthcare in the past, and helping companies kind of onboard onto their Edison platform and get into their marketplace there. So we've done programs like that. And sometimes those mandates or those remits change in our thesis and our model of what we're looking for under the healthcare umbrella in that situation. Can change a little bit. We might go upscale, up market, down market a little bit there as well. We also have a fintech side of the house where we make investments, but we're also doing, and right now I'm actually in an airport in Atlanta. We just launched our first round of investments for a $40 million fund for our historically Black colleges and universities founders out of our Founders Fund program, which is really great. We have some healthcare companies in there, ed tech, and some others, which is really neat. So we're proud of that. But I'll stop for now. I'm sure we have more to talk about, and I'll pass it over to my esteemed colleague, Yuan.
Oh, thank you, Nick. So my name is Yuan. I'm the Senior Director of Scientific Ops and Strategy at Portal. So Portal, we are a venture capital fund. We invest in early stage biotech companies. So series seed stage companies. So usually this is their first private capital outside of the academic labs. We also have wet and dry lab space that you can see in the virtual background, where we incubate our companies in. So we have a vested stake in some of the companies that are actually working out of our space. Our informal model is we live with our investments. And that's how, we've really believed that in order for early stage biotech companies to succeed, you need not only the financial capital, you also need the infrastructure, and most importantly, you need the environment. So kind of exactly what Steven was talking about earlier, and having the network capabilities, bringing people who are part of regulatory, who are part of pharma, who are part of business development, bringing them all into one watering hole to make sure that all the biotech companies have the opportunity to thrive as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. So we have about $6 million worth of equipment in Chicago. We are opening up our Atlanta and Boston offices as we speak. I'm actually sitting in the Boston office now. So Nick, we might have to talk offline also.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so we're doing the same model where we're, operating fully equipped wet lab space and dry lab space. So we have everything from your pH meters to a bioreactor if you're interested in cell therapy. If you look at our portfolio, we have about 70% of it is actually in therapeutics. And then we have, the remaining is in med tech. So devices, med devices, we're kind of indication agnostic. The one criteria is that you have to have some human health related. So we won't do kind of like a software or something like that if it's just for, talking to electronic medical records or something like that. But yeah, we have about 36 companies in Chicago. We have one company here in Boston already, and we're gearing up for Atlanta and others. So I'm really excited to kind of see this develop. And thank you so much for having me on this panel.
So I'm asking everybody to use the Q&A for any questions they have, but I also have a few, and I want to start with one for the teams, which is they next week, Friday, are going into their pitch competition. So they've been competing for the last 7 months in order to develop out their solution, and wondering if you have any advice to them in regards to pitching their solution. Are there key elements of the pitch that they should include? And so I'll lob that over to Yuan, since you're nodding very emphatically.
I also have a tendency to nod, so I'm kind of a bobblehead a little bit. So in my role at Portal, I sit between our venture arm and our lab arm. So help diligence the companies that they're coming through pitching to Portal, as well as help support them in this space. So from an investor point of view, what I like to see in pitches is a very concise but straight to the point. What is the problem that you're trying to address? Why is your problem unique? How are you protecting that problem? So how are you making sure that nobody else is getting that? Kind of use the same solution or same technology. So kind of like patent portfolio, or, do you have any trade secrets or something like that? And then also kind of what's the market size? So for investors like Portal, we're looking at early stage companies, there's a lot of risk. So we want to make sure that, there's a large enough market at the end of the road for all the companies, so that it, helps to offset some of the risk. And then lastly, the team. We like to know who has a vested stake, who is going to run this company, who's going to operate this company, because that's also important too. There is also a saying within venture that you could bet on the horse or you could bet on the jockey. And I am of the mind that you bet on the jockey. So it's all about the execution, all about the operations.
Steven, you want to weigh in, or?
Yeah, I mean, that was very nicely said. So I would add, the only thing I would really add is that a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, especially first ones who are operating in healthcare, don't spend enough time thinking through the business model. And, especially for software, but even with other types of technology, the business model in healthcare is generally not obvious or frequently not obvious. And you can be solving a big problem. You can have a unique solution that clearly solves the problem or clearly improves health in some way, and there's absolutely no market for it because of just the cockamamie way that healthcare is paid for and operates, particularly in this country. And so having a clear idea of how you're ultimately going to make money, who's actually going to buy the product, and how that's all going to work, even if a lot of it in the very early days is a hypothesis, is still really critical to see and include as part of the overview, part of the presentation.
Yeah. I guess I'll answer your question with a question real fast. How many minutes do these folks have to pitch for this specific one? So I'll try to tailor my answer to that.
Yeah, so they have a total of 20 minutes
Okay.
between pitch and Q&A. So we
Okay.
often recommend keep your pitch to about 10 minutes and then let the judges
Okay,
ask you a lot of questions.
That gives me some good context. So I think I'll take a little bit of a different tack. I think at the early stages where it seems like these companies are, a lot of it it comes down to Yuan's point is what I call founder market fit, or what some of the folks in the industry call founder market fit. So a lot of that has to do with your why and potentially your personal story. So what is that thing that makes you the compelling founder that's going to get up every morning in the face of a million no's, and you're going to get it done because you believe in it? And so sometimes this can be a personal story, things to really think about hooking people in. You can kind of think of the narrative arc of a pitch. You want to have a hook, you want to have a middle, you want to have an end, and that hero's journey, you're the guide that's taking the audience on this path. So you need to remember that. And it's a competition. It's exactly that. You want to win, you want to impress. There needs to be a level of entertainment to this a bit as well. So you want to keep things, energetic. You want to not just fall into the sciencey thing, because that can do that. And I'll help you stand out from the call. I think other things that are really important, especially in your early days, is anything that can demonstrate traction. Specifically as investors, we're risk averse and we want to find ways to say no. So if you can do things to overcome that, and you can think about it in the early days, it's not always, transactions don't always happen in dollars. They can come in other ways as well. Emails, it could be surveys, it could be someone is offering their time as an advisor, or key members, or you're getting free dev work or something like that, right? And so you can be creative with your traction story, and not to boost anything up or say anything that's untrue, right? That's not the goal here, but to give yourself a little bit of credit for the hard work that you've done there too. So you can think about it a little bit a different way. But for me, it's really, I'm going to trust that you're in healthcare. It's like a $3 trillion market. It's huge regardless, right? I want to know at the earliest stages that why you're the person that's going to do it, and what makes your company compelling. What's your value proposition that sticks out from the rest of the folks? And that's kind of what I look for. And make it entertaining and fun. You're supposed to have fun when you're building a business. It's not all it's hard work, but you should have a little bit of fun too. And under this hat, I had a company at one time. There's no hair and I lost it all. So you can either lose your hair and have fun, or you can lose your hair and not have fun. I'll take the lose hair and have fun.
So we do have a question in the Q&A. It's addressed to Nick, but I think it's for the whole group. What is the range of your investment, and can you share some insights into the process method to determine valuation?
Yeah. So a lot of the times, there's a standard set of terms with accelerators. Ours is like 7% for $120,000. And then we also give you the plus the program, which is that dedicated advisor. Part of our investment is that we're actually paying a retainer fee to those advisors to work with you for the duration of the business. So there's those kind of standard terms, and usually there's a valuation that's tied with that. I think ours is right around like between 6 and 8 million or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but there's usually a standard set of terms. And then you're also, as a founder, going to have your own idea of the valuation of the business, or you at least should be thinking about that, because if you let an investor decide what your valuation is, it's probably not going to, you're probably not going to like it, and it's going to be very costly equity to you, or even more costly if you do it in the form of like a safe or convertible note. So I'd say, as you think about your business in the early stage, what are some of those assets? Yuan talked about, protecting things. If you have any IP, whether that's copyrighted software or patents or what have you, And what are those assets there? So that's how you can start to build a valuation story there. A lot of folks in the early days raise off safes or convertible notes as a method to delay the valuation of a business. So I would look into that as well. And usually that's like set your cap at like a $3 to $5 million or something like that, and you have all those terms. So I would encourage you as a founder to have your own valuation and have, you know, your own self-worth of what you think your company is. And then because a lot of these accelerators or incubators are going to have their own standard set of terms, and you're just going to have to fit into that. So you know, we try to have a two-way street at Nex Cubed, but I'll take a pause there and I'll pass it over to the rest of the panel here.
For Portal, we don't have a set standard of terms. We are fairly kind of instrument agnostic, though we do work with safes, convertible notes, also price equity, depending on who else is investing. The check sizes that Portal is able to write, we're able to write up to $1 million in Series seed rounds. We also have a sidecar fund that we have the option of investing in for Series A later rounds, so maintaining our pro rata rights and stuff like that. And then how we determine valuation is based off of the market. So we look at kind of what other transactions have happened in that particular space, in that particular vehicle, whether it be a therapeutic, a med device, and who was the, you know, how much was it bought for, how much was it worth, and we kind of let that guide us. And then for, you know, when you're looking at negotiations, you're always going to have to end up negotiating between kind of the lead investor and yours and the company. So it's not just on value. I would not just focus on valuation. I would actually focus quite a bit on control, and control can actually look in very different ways. So in some ways I would, you know, it really all kind of depends. Like you might be willing to trade off on having some, you know, lower valuation if it means that you have a larger control of the company. Something to think about.
Only thing I would add is most investors, but a lot of investors will have a target percentage ownership that they want. And so the valuation is sort of there's an iterative process. So if an investor, you know, a seed stage investor knows they want to own 20% of the company, and they're willing to write $1 million check, then they're going to need to have a $4 million pre-money valuation so that they end up with 20% of the company. Really early stage valuations, especially in software, I think, are really more of an art than a science. It's sort of like, you know, there's conventions, there's things that are, you know, at this time in the market, and early stage SaaS company that's selling to health systems, you know, might have a $4 million ish valuation. And most people are going to, as Nick was saying, use a note or a safe or something like that. At the real early stage, it's hard to have a really robust model for how that's going to look. So you'll see investors kind of come at it from a bunch of different directions. There's comps that Yuan was talking about. There's kind of trends. There's backing into it based on the percentage ownership that they want to have, and then they'll kind of arrive at something. Matter doesn't invest directly. We have formal relationships with a dozen venture firms. We have an angel network. So we do a lot of sort of working with entrepreneurs to help them get ready to raise money and then go out and connect them with investors, but we don't have capital to deploy ourselves.
Great. So we do have another question from Rufus, and it's, are there specific things in our pitch that our pitch should contain for the Third Coast AI? How is machine learning used? Ethical considerations of AI? How solution address health equity, etc. How do we balance these things with all the things you mentioned, like business model, problem solution, defensibility, the story, given our time constraints? Do certain things, you know, take priority over the competition versus pricing for investors? That's really specific to our bowl, so I'll start and then I'll let you guys kind of weigh in. But I think you always have to, in a student competition, it's a little different from a startup competition. but similar as well. But since the competition is specifically addressing issues around health equity, I think like you definitely want to be able to mention how your solution actually solves the health equity and, you know, the ethical basis of your, you know, how you're remediating for some of those issues. But, you know, I'll kind of let you guys weigh in on what else they need to prioritize. And Steven's judge, so he knows.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a first stab at it. Just a real quick thought that I have is, you know, specifically in some of these pitch competitions, I'll kind of lean more on the startup side of things. You know, it's your intention is sometimes not necessarily to have to answer every question in that, you know, 3 to 5 minutes or 10 minutes or what have you. You're not going to be able to do that per se. It's to get the next meeting. That's really your goal, is to get somebody to come up to you to ask those questions. So, you know, you can say things like, you know, we're building it in an ethical or sustainable way, or we're trying to, you know, take in those considerations, and you can kind of touch on it. And, you know, I'm certain that folks that maybe want to dive into that deeper, you could say, hey, we're happy to expand more on this. Come ask us after that. But I think, you know, people in this short pitch are going to be really more interested on the traction of the business and some of those other like business model fundamental things. And then you can kind of touch on it and say, hey, come meet me after. That's maybe how I do it in a short time frame. But for your specific pitch, it might be different.
I go back to something Nick said earlier, that you're telling a story and there should be a beginning and a middle and an end. And it's, you know, somehow through that, you need to share that you, first of all, that you understand all the things that you're talking about, and that you have a really good understanding of the market, and that it's a big market, and that there's a big problem in the world that there isn't a solution out there for. And that problem causes people pain. And it's a problem that is going to rise to the top of their priority list. So it's, you know, there's lots of companies out there that are solving problems that are nice to have, and some of them might make it, most of them aren't. The ones that do make it are problems that are solving, that are solutions that are solving really painful problems that people need solutions for, whether it's a patient and it's something directly related to health, whether it's a health system and, you know, they're trying to use technology in new ways, or whatever it is. And, you know, so understanding the market, understanding the problem and the scale of the problem, how it is that your solution is going to be the one that is going to address that that problem, and then, you know, why are you the right people to be doing it? You know, as Nick said, a lot of founders have very compelling personal stories. Sometimes they just have really amazing experience that ties in directly to what it is that they're doing. But somehow the passion that you have for solving this problem with this solution needs to come through in your pitch, because if you aren't the most passionate person in the universe about what you're doing, then nobody else is going to get excited enough to want to jump on your team, whether it's being a team member or an investor or whatever it is.
I would agree with everything that has already been said. And then I would also say that, you know, it's not just a 10-minute pitch. I would also look at the Q&A as part of your pitch too. So you can mention things in your 10-minute formal pitch, but then also have them be teed up so that there are questions that you anticipate to address in your Q&A. And then I would also highlight and exclamation mark what Nick said about the goal of it is the next meeting. It's not, you know, you'll never be in hard. I will say never. I don't say never, but, you know, you're rarely in the situation where you do one pitch and you get a check. It's going to be a process. It's going to be like a dating process. You're going to meet with an investor over time, probably, you know, over like 8 months, before you would actually get a term sheet and a check in the bank. So the main goal of it is to entice people enough so that you continue to have follow-on conversations. So you don't have to address everything, just bullet points.
Yeah. So, you know, assuming these, you know, student teams go on, it's a good opportunity. The goal is to be able to hone their presentation skills. But I think also because they're all academic teams, a question that I have is, do you have any suggestions on ways they can find the right industry partners, given that these are all university teams?
When you say industry partners, what do you mean?
Well, so these are all university teams, and some of them may want to go out and find partnerships, or people who are willing to pilot their solutions. And so how do they go about and do that? Find a health system that is willing to try out their algorithm, find a company, a payer that might be willing to try out their solution. What do you suggest?
I would suggest Matter.
That's awesome.
Not a bad place to start.
Yes, I agree.
And
we do a lot of that, so appreciate that. We can certainly help. There's other organizations that can help. It's a lot, I would assume that depending on what it is that you're doing, you're probably going to have to, same thing with raising money, you're probably going to have to talk to dozens and dozens of potential places before you find one where the fit is quite right. And I guess before you go out to that, and thank you, Juan, but it's certainly something we can help with, but is structuring and figuring out what exactly do you want? What is that going to look like? Are you, just like, you need to have a pretty detailed, or at least a pretty solid understanding of what it is that you are going to go in and what you want to do, because most likely whoever you're meeting with is, getting pitched a gazillion times a week on doing different things. And so one where it's easy for that person to understand, not only are you solving a big problem and you have an amazing solution, but what you want to do with XYZ health system is boom, boom, boom. And here's what that would look like. And here's how many patients we'd need. And here's having a lot of those details fleshed out will make the conversations much more productive, assuming you can get to that point of having a conversation.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Nick.
Sure, no problem. I think, yes, there's two ways to do it. I think you're looking at organizations like Matter, Nex Cubed as well. We have programs like GE where you have a partnership where folks are expressing mandates for, being able to go out and really say, hey, well, this is what we're looking for specifically. Also, too, there's other ways to do it internally, I would say, is finding what's called, I like to say, your ideal customer persona and your value proposition. Apologies if there's any background noise here. It's a little busy in the terminal. But the idea with you're developing an ideal customer persona based off your value proposition. So what is the value that you can bring to a business at the end of the day? Because you have to realize that the person on the other side of the screen or in the meeting is just a person. And a lot of the time for them, it's how are they going to feed their family? Where are my next quarterly goals? How am I going to get my bonus and my raise and my promotion? Those are the things that move everybody, that moves industry, that moves healthcare. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing about it. There's still a human involved on the other side of it. And so you have to realize that those person's incentives, and you need to align yourself to those incentives. It's not always what in the early days, unfortunately, what a startup wants out of the relationship. It's going to be a lot of what does that business want? So you can align yourself and really start to find areas where you can say, no, I'm not there yet. And that'll reduce and shrink your window and actually make your world smaller and say, okay, well, these are the 20 health systems or payers that I can work with right now because I can provide this value based off my MVP. And I'm going to go to them. And now what do you do next? You go talk to your advisors. If you're in Matter, you have your mentors and you say, okay, who's connected? Who can get me in there? Or you're working with Nex Cubed, same thing, or Portal. You leverage your network to be able to say, I need to get into these places because I've already pre-identified that my value proposition matches with the need. Even better if they've made a press release, even better if you have an internal champion that says, I've got a mandate to make this thing happen. And if you can get to that point, you're really going to be on the right track because things rarely happen without the company already having their mind made up. They're going to entertain you and they're going to say, we're going to keep you warm. We're going to lead you along. And the worst thing is like a slow maybe for an early stage company. you want a fast no or a quick yes. And so you want to do the most to eliminate it. So I always tell folks, like, the exercise is actually figuring out where to say no to first in terms of your building your sales process and those types of things. So that's my kind of, I look at it from a little bit of a different perspective, but everything they said as well is absolutely accurate and can be applied to the same thing.
I think one last thing I'll add from the university perspective is all of you have tech transfer offices within your universities, and those would be a good place to start to talk to them about what relationships they have, because some incubator space can be very local. So, we have teams from all over the Midwest, and so I would just encourage you also to investigate that. So there's a question here. Stephen, how does a startup know when it's right to engage with an organization like Matter, and what's the process?
So we work with startups that are trying to solve problems that can improve health or the business of healthcare. So that's criteria number one. In order to be a member of Matter, there's an application process where we ask a bunch of questions. We look at some sort of a business plan or a deck or something that you have. We interview companies and then make a decision. We work with companies that are, in many ways, really just getting started. You have to have a company, and you can't just be an idea. You have to have something and be committed to building it. But we will work with companies that are really quite early, that I would say are not investable yet. They're, on the real early scale of the spectrum, all the way through to companies that are growing in the market and accumulating customers and have raised their Series B and are scaling. And that was one of the things that we really wanted to build into our model, was the ability to work with companies and create cross-pollination and idea sharing across that whole continuum.
I also want to add that the winner of this bowl gets a subscription to Matter. So I encourage you to use that.
I'd just add real quickly, a lot of the accelerator programs or incubator programs will tell you exactly what they're looking for. It's usually on the website. It's in the application process. And there's, as I'm sure Stephen said as well, so a lot of folks will tell you. The folks who won't tell you are the companies. And so that's usually, and so if you can align yourself with an accelerator, that's usually the best way, also to get in. But, a lot of times accelerators and incubators will tell you exactly what they're looking for. And it's just right on their website.
So the next question I have is, what advice do you have for staying motivated to bring an idea to fruition when faced with competing priorities, setbacks, and other obstacles? Stephen?
Well, so every startup is a journey with a lot of ups and downs, and every entrepreneur you talk to has been through moments where they're wondering, like, why am I doing this? There's so many easier paths to anything than why am I doing battle every day and dealing with all this? And there's always those moments. The thing that generally keeps people going is their passion for doing what it is that they're doing. And if you're not so passionate that you have to be doing this thing, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, because you're going to run into really annoying, challenging, frustrating situations. And again, there's a lot of easier paths. So unless this is like the thing that you should be doing with your life right now, you might want to think about whether it actually is the thing, because it's going to be miserable at a lot of points along the journey.
So
I mean, Nick lost all his hair, so that's.
Yep. And I turned 30 in July, so that's what you got to look forward to.
So, before Portal, I co-founded Surat Therapeutics. We were a biotech company that was spinning out of University of Chicago. We had set up shop in the Polsky incubator, and I always tell people, going from 0 to 1 is much, much harder than going from 1 to 100. And that's because you're trying to create something out of nothing. Create something, that wasn't there before. And that's incredibly hard. You're going to face a lot of no's. You're going to face a lot of like doubts and questions and tribulations. And exactly what Steven said, you're going to face a lot of like, oh, my colleagues are working for, Bain, they're working for BCG, they're working for McKinsey. They have a set job. They know exactly what project they're supposed to be working on. And it's just that project. And, they're not trying to figure out accounting. They're not trying to figure out legal. They're not trying to figure out what is their value proposition and what, how much money, how much runway do they have? The problems that you end up tackling as an entrepreneur are just, infinite. And so, you have to really believe that you are the person to do this. Otherwise, I fully agree with Steve. And, this road is not for everybody. And I think you have to also be like a little bit nuts to believe in it, that you can do it.
I'd double down and say you'd have to be a lot of bit nuts. It's the hardest way to make an easy living is what our managing director just said to our startups this week, which is hilarious. I think if you're starting to ask yourself that question, you might really need to think about it, because if that question's popping in your head, it's already kind of, the seeds planted. That's not to say that it might just not be this idea, right? And that's okay. And that's just the thing. And what I think is that it's like falling in love, right? You kind of have this blind, just honeymoon situation with it. I'm so infatuated, I can't put it down. I can't get away from it. It's like, it's one of those things. And so that can come from just a passion for the science. Maybe your mom passed away, or somebody that was very close to you, and you're like, that's my why. I've got to, live for them and do other things. And so you hear all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I think, the other thing I would say about this, and this is kind of maybe, the way I was raised or grew up, but I don't necessarily believe in motivation. I believe in discipline, because discipline will get you in the days where you don't have the motivation. So I just don't think motivation gets you anywhere. It gives you like a hot flash and then you're gone. But if you have the discipline, you can kind of continue to do it, because this is one of the hardest things that you're going to do. And the other thing you need to ask yourself is, are you in it for the fame and the glory, or are you in it for the actual like hard work and to actually build a business? Because sometimes a lot of folks, in the early days, and I even fell into this a little bit, being a younger millennial, is like, you can fall into like the little bit of the fame and the stardom. I'm winning these pitch competitions, I'm in this thing, and I'm getting the social gratification of it. And I want to be the next fill in the blank entrepreneur, right? That you see on TV. And that's very romanticized, but what they don't tell you is that it's very lonely, and it's very hard. If you go into business with friends, you might have to fire a best friend. You might have, it's crazy. You have no idea the stuff that can happen. So first, if you're asking yourself that question, how am I going to find motivation to do this? You probably should think about just like not doing it. And then also motivation, you should just do discipline instead. So those are my kind of two things about it.
So I have a question around just at what you guys are seeing out in the marketplace, because we all know that the financial economy is pretty turbulent right now. And I'm just wondering if you can give our team sort of this, perspective of where you think, is there investment dollars out there? Is this still a good time for them to try to make their pitches?
I totally think that there's enough room in the world for everyone to succeed, and that you'll find it if it's supposed to happen. If you look back at some of the biggest companies that are, the top players now, they're all born in 2008, 2010, right after the recession. So, what happens in recessions is that a lot of good founders get let go from their day jobs and they turn into entrepreneurs. And so innovation happens in chaos. So I think if it's destined, it's bound to happen. And if you have the discipline and you're determined, you're super passionate, you're going to figure it out whether there's a recession or not. So that's just the cards that you're dealt, and you got to play the hand. That's my 2 cents on it.
There's definitely still capital to invest. A lot of dry in the industry, we call a lot of dry powder. People are just going to take a little bit longer to make that decision of a yes or of a yes. That's just the name of the game right now. I would also say that this environment doesn't actually change the business fundamentals, right? You still have to be careful and disciplined about how you spend your cash and how you manage your runway. And if the business is a good idea, investors will invest in it.
So, most of I think the focus here is on kind of software and healthcare software and analytics for software. And relative to the last decade, it's a horrible time to be out fundraising. There's a lot more reticence. It takes longer to have more conversations. The investors are preserving more of their capital for their existing portfolios. Valuations have come way down compared to where they were 2 years ago. All that said, I agree with what both Nick and Yuan said, and would just add, again, going back to the sort of passion and if this is the thing that needs to happen and you really want to be working on and you're passionate about it and you're disciplined and this is the life that you want to lead, then yeah, you should go raise money and be optimistic about it, even though even in good times, fundraising is a really challenging activity and consumes an enormous amount of time, and it's frustrating, and you get told no all the time, and you're second guessing things, and so that is probably even worse right now. But if this is the thing that you're committed to, then you should go do it. And there is money out there, no doubt. So you just gotta find the right fit. It's like finding a target and a drug, and it fits together.
Do you have any advice on, how to go about finding funding?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in real quick. The way that I always tell our folks is, again, similar to customers, you should have an ideal investor profile. There's kind of a few different ways that you can get money. You can either get, like I always call it, smart money, or or you can get some bad money. Usually your smallest check is the most pain in the butt investor. So just remember that. That's my thing I've always said. But I always look at like the funds that have invested in businesses similar to me, right? And then also you can kind of extrapolate maybe who's the funds that were, if you can get in with the investor crowd, like who are the ones that were in maybe on this deal or missed out, and then you're the next one that's coming through, so they have some of this FOMO situation. So I try to build, an investor profile of what I need, and then I also try to find the folks that are investing and looking for me, and I try to triangulate from that point. But that's pretty much the way I would do it. Just build your profile and look for who you're looking for. And also be realistic about the stage of business that you're at. And sometimes a lot of folks want to go to big institutions, but really you're at an angel stage. And that's a big thing. So kind of be real and honest with yourself there too.
I would also say that when you're an entrepreneur, you're always pitching. You're always pitching your company, even if you don't have your slide deck with you and you're not in a formal pitch, because anybody that you meet when you talk about your company could potentially introduce you to somebody who could be an investor, or could, be the right mentor, or could be the right advisor, which sometimes is worth, their weight in gold. So in terms of actually finding investors, exactly what Nick said, like look for investors that have invested in that particular industry with that particular check size that you're looking for, and round size that you're looking for. And then I think this is where you don't want to be building in isolation. You want to be building in an environment like Matter or Nex Cubed or, Self-Initiate Portal, in the sense that you have, a network of people that could potentially advocate for you on your behalf.
I just want to add one other thing, because I realize that most of the people are affiliated with universities, and universities probably have subscriptions to PitchBook that you can access. And PitchBook is a great resource. you can slice and dice investors in a lot of different ways and come up with a target list, and then figure out how you get connections to those firms. And, but starting with a list of investors that fit the profile you're looking for is worth a lot compared to just trying to Google around and figure it out on your own.
So we do have
real quick, I do want to add
Yeah,
something on that last point that Stephen made. That's very important. If you do kind of willy-nilly go around and start pinging investors, folks talk. They'll also say that, hey, this person, have you talked to this person? And sometimes you can build a little bit of a reputation of, I'm just kind of scatterblasting everybody, and that can be like a bad look sometimes. So being more strategic is very important because investors talk behind the scenes. I just wanted to add that because Stephen made a good point. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. So UA has a question about, what do you think about the product design in the process of digital innovation in healthcare? Can you address it from the competition perspective and the market perspective?
Not sure I understand the question.
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I could take a stab.
Okay.
I guess from like a product design perspective, I think maybe if maybe they're showing like wireframes in the pitch, maybe I'll take it from that perspective. If you're in a pitch and product design, I think like a demonstration, like more of like a demo, is probably better than like a product design or wireframe, something that you can speak to. So I think if it's additive and it's easy to explain and it's easy for the audience to get, then you can include it in like a pitch or something like that. But also that's an opportunity for you to say, hey, I'm doing a demo after this, come meet me after, if some of the technology things. So I think especially in the early days, it's unless it's super novel or super, advanced for the stage that it's in, sometimes it's not, it can be a little bit clunky. So that's maybe I'll take it from a demo perspective in a pitch.
Yeah. One more question from Rufus. For a company that is using insurance reimbursement as the primary driver of revenue, how are letters of intent from billing clinicians and insurance companies perceived by investors in terms of evidence of traction? Is it just shy of actual revenue, or is it not really comparable?
Steven, you want to go for it?
It's better than nothing, for sure. Nothing is as good as revenue. I wouldn't say every investor probably has a different perspective. I would not say it's just shy of revenue. I'd say it's fairly significantly shy of revenue, but it's also a lot better than nothing and just a hope and a prayer. But Nick and Juan actually do invest. Would be curious their perspectives.
Yeah. MOUs are better, I would say, like, something that's actually kind of signed. I think it shows, an intention to work together. I think I would be more interested in understanding kind of how far along the conversation is, maybe more in that kind of sales process or the sales cycle, like looking at your kind of weighted pipeline might be more interesting to see kind of how things go. So letters of intent are great. They kind of get me more interested, but at the end of the day, nothing, we always say revenue is the best deodorant, to Steven's point, that's revenue is king. At the end of the day, cash is king. So I'd say include it, better than nothing.
And then I would say also on top of that, I would like to see traction within physicians. So it's not just the payer reimbursement. You want to make sure that the physician is actually also prescribing it or writing it or using it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, too, one thing, I don't know if you've seen this as well. A lot of folks think that it's a compelling argument or a compelling part of their pitch to say, we're going to get our own novel code. And that's you're shaking your head, right? Because you're paving the way and you're making the investment for everybody else to use that same code, right? So if you can kind of opt into other things and actually show that physicians or people are using it, it's better than, this other thing. I also think too, it's interesting. It maybe what it could signify is that there is the letter of intent shows that there's an existing code that you can utilize and that you could use that in your financial projections later down the road. That kind of makes it more compelling for me. But still, cash is king at the end of the day.
So I have one last question, and it is, what do you think is the most important factor for a successful company launch?
I will say this till, my last breath, the team, the founding team. You can take a mediocre technology, but with the right founder, you can make it into something quite incredible. Or you can take incredible technology and have a mediocre founding team, and you will just still have an incredible technology, but it won't really have a market. Because at the end, it's the execution of it.
Ditto. Founder market fit, major thing for me, especially the earliest stages. That's what we, like you said, you stole the words analogy, right? You got to bet on the horse or the jockey. I'm betting on the jockey, right? So.
Yeah, ditto. The only thing I might add is, in addition to the technical capabilities and the dynamics between the team and variety of their background and what they've done before and who you've worked with, just the passion for succeeding and being a really passionate founder. You get the sense that they'll just run through anything in order to get the job done. And that's really important, especially with early stage companies.
I do also have to give, so one of my colleagues, Steve Lyman, he uses this analogy quite a bit, and I do like it. So it's kind of about surfing. So in order for everything to succeed, right, the surfboard is the technology, the surfer is the team, and the wave is the market condition. So how are people feeling about that particular technology? How are they feeling about that particular space? That also is, incredibly important to make sure that you have it right. If you are trying to surf and you don't have all three at the same time, it's not really going to work, for a multitude of different reasons. But yeah, I would also think about that too.
I like that.
I might steal that, please and thank you.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
That is great.
So we have sort of the last 5 or so minutes, and I just want to kind of do a round robin and see what encouraging words each of you has for for the teams as they go into next Friday in their pitch competition. We'll start with Stephen.
Well, I think it is despite the funding challenges and the weird dynamics in the market, it's a spectacular time to be innovating in healthcare. There is so much more that technology and artificial intelligence and data can do today than even a year ago, or certainly 5 years ago. It was like the Stone Ages compared to what is possible today. And so you're part of something that really has an enormous amount of potential to change the world for into a much better place, because the way we do healthcare is suboptimal from so many different ways of looking at it and ways of thinking about it, and technology is going to play a huge role in improving health and healthcare, and so it's a good time to be doing what you're doing.
Nick?
Yeah, I'll kind of go back to what I said before. I truly believe that there's enough room in the world for everyone to succeed. And, at the end of the day, I'm going to be full of cliches here. It's only failure if you don't learn, right? So that's the other thing. And that's very true. I believe that a lot as well. So as you go through this pitch or this competition, if you don't win, or you're feeling like you didn't perform as well, like, take a hard look, be honest with yourself. And that's okay, because you're going to be much further along faster the more honest and transparent you are with yourself and your business and looking at it. And I always like to say, don't fall in love with your own ideas, right? That's another cliche there. I think I'm up to like 3 in this one little thing, but they all are very true. So continue to learn, continue to fail, fall forward, and just trust in yourself that it's all going to happen, and life's a random walk. So I think I got all my cliches out. So you're good to go. You guys will all be fine. You're going to do great.
Yuan?
I would also say have fun with it. It's an incredible process. It's an incredible journey. If you ever get the entrepreneurship bug, like you're doing now, I don't think there's anything quite like it. So just have fun with it.
So I want to really thank you, the three of you, because this is our sort of, last one. And next week, the students will be, it will be the final product of their last 7 months of development work. So thank you very much for taking the time out to share your knowledge with them.
Thanks for including me.
having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay, bye.
Bye.